With the November update to New World, we've had a lot of changes, namely to these weapons. There are of course a few other updates. For instance, when you walk for 3 seconds on a road, you will gain a 10% extra speed boost buff. This won't be in effect while in combat in any way. They've also made trading with other players to be completely worldwide, so every settlement will be connected with one another with their trading posts. No longer, if you post something in one settlement, will it be just stuck there and nobody could buy it from another settlement. So let's jump into these weapon buffs and nerfs. First up, we have the Warhammer. Now they've tried to balance it more between the Juggernaut and the Crowd Crusher, making the Juggernaut a little bit more appealing. First thing to note is Armor Breaker will now actually have its rend effectiveness from its lasting trauma to be 20%, as we can see, instead of 15%, with Opening Act now being 25% instead of just 15%. This Armor Breaker attack has also been made a little bit easier to actually hit your target. Then with your Mighty Gravel, they've changed it so that it now deals 170 base damage instead of 160. The cooldown has been reduced from 22 seconds down to just 20 seconds. And with the final capstone on the Juggernaut tree, Justice for All, the damage has been increased to 220% instead of just 200. Then we have the Wrecking Ball, and this damage was also increased up to 130% from 120%, with its safety measures now increasing the Fortify buff from 4 seconds to 7 seconds. Then we have with Crowd Crusher, the Clear Out has been fixed so that it will be more effective when striking multiple enemies. Shockwave was reduced with its item perk benefit, which was causing rend on targets, and that's been reduced from 20% down to 10%. These are item perks that you can put on your weapons. And then with your Pass of Destiny, same with the item perk that would come with it, which was called Leeching Path of Destiny. They fixed a bug that prevented this perk from actually working properly when you had this simulated reduction equipped. As for the passives, we have the Exhaust here. This one will actually give a debuff now that's 20% up from 15%. So now we move to the Life Staff, and it's had an overall nerf of 20% reduction to its outgoing healing of all of its powers. However, to compensate that, they've made it so that now light armor will increase your healing by 30%. It used to be just 20%. You can see in the tooltip there, it says 30%. Medium will now have a 15% instead of 10%, and heavy gives no additional benefit. So they're trying to make healers a little less tanky by nudging them to be using the lighter armor. They've changed up some of those targeting spells like your Divine Embrace and your Light's Embrace. They made it so that it'll be a little bit easier to target and lock onto them with a max range of 25 meters. Then with Sacred Ground, they've reduced the Fortify perk that you could get on your items to go with this down from that 15% maximum to just 10% maximum. Holy Ground now only gives mana regen of 50% faster rather than 100% faster. And if this healing is stacked from multiple sources, it won't actually stack together. You can only have one Sacred Ground benefiting you at a time. Splash of Light has had its effectiveness increased from 40% to 60%, and the shared recovery was increased from 3% up to 5%. Then the Orb of Protection, they fixed an issue that this effect was being refreshed by the healing applied from Protector's Blessing, and the Mending Protection perk, the one for this power, was fundamentally changed so that instead of triggering if the target does not have any active buffs, it now triggers if the target was healed by the Orb of Protection when under 50% health. Then your Light's Embrace power, this one was just changed so that its connection upgrade is now 2% instead of just 1%. And an item perk, Blessed, reduced its healing bonus effectiveness from a range of 10 to 30% to 5 to 20%. Then we move to the Hatchet. And in general, they fixed an issue with aimed throw that it could be used to cancel basic attacks at any time. And with this Berserk ability, they fixed an issue where activating it could consume the Relentless Fury and the accumulated Empower buffs. It fixed an issue where Feral Rush could be activated and not actually put on cooldown. That was just within settlements. And with your Raging Torrent, they fixed some of the issues where some of those attacks were just missing for no reason. Now with your Infected Throw, they've increased the disease and the weakness duration from 5 seconds to 10 seconds. They've also adjusted the Mortal Power duration on low health targets is from 8 seconds to actually 15 seconds. And then with your Aerial Transmission, that has been increased its duration from 3 seconds to 6 seconds. And then your Rending Throw has had its cooldown reduced from 15 seconds to just 8 seconds. And finally, the capstone perk you could get with the Berserker tree, this Defy Death, the cooldown has been adjusted so it won't refresh whenever you die. Then we move to this Grey Tax, and they fixed an issue where this Reap ability was incorrectly triggering a breakout dodge. Then your Gravity Well, they fixed an issue where its slow effect was not correctly removed if you were able to actually get out of the area with some power, and thus it was still lasting 2 seconds longer than it actually should. And they've adjusted the tooltip to actually show it does deal some damage whenever you hit the targets, that 99% weapon damage. Then your Whirlwind, they've adjusted it so it adds grit to the Whirlwind, and you can get an item perk with it that fixes an issue with Fortifying Whirlwind perk where you could get too many of those fortify stacks. And this Heavy Pull passive was fixed where it had an issue that heavy attacks were incorrectly hitboxing, and thus you weren't hitting correctly if you were using your heavy attacks with this passive active. And then the Gravity perk here should no longer increase the duration of all pulls. They've updated it so now it actually shows 0.25 seconds rather than what it was before previously. Then we have this Bow, and with its primary attack, they fixed an issue that allowed consecutive primary attacks to be fired faster than they should have intended to be. They've updated the tooltip with Rain of Arrows, your Poison Shot, and also your Splinter Shot, so that you can see each of them cannot achieve any headshot damage. They fixed an issue where some of these attacks were not benefiting from the extra damage with higher level arrows. Then we have your Evade Shot, and this upgrade with the third one there, Go to Distance, should now apply haste for 5 seconds, but it will apply this after you've fired the arrow, not before. The cooldown on this Poison Shot has gone down from 35 seconds to 30 seconds, and then your Rapid Shot also got a cooldown reduction from 20 seconds to 14 seconds. Its rapid accuracy was fixed so now it should probably reduce the cooldown. Your Rain of Arrows should no longer hit enemies that are behind a door. Then we move to the Sword and Shield, and they've adjusted this Leaping Strike to make it feel a little bit better and also to improve the buffering you would get with heavy attacks. Then with your Shield Rush, they've increased the weaken duration from 4 seconds to 10 seconds. The benefit you could achieve with improved rush. Then with your Leaping Strike, the cooldown has been reduced from 25 seconds down to just 18 seconds. And they've also increased the damage from 135% to 150%. And they've also made it quicker that you can activate the next ability after finishing Leaping Strike. And finally, this Cowardly Punishment was updated to actually include the slow percentage value. You can see there 50%. Then we move to this Fire Staff, and the Pillar of Fire will now actually deal 170% weapon damage, up from 134, and they've kind of nerfed it by fixing it that it doesn't hit twice. So I guess that's tit for tat. It will now do actually more damage on that single hit, but won't have the ability to hit twice. And there was also some bug when you went and cast it, it would end up casting on yourself rather than where you were actually targeting. And they fixed with Meteor Shower that it should actually cause this rune effect to proc when you actually press to cast it rather than just to aim it. Fireball has had some added clarity to the tooltip that this ability cannot actually crit. Previously it would show the crit damage but not actually increase the damage, it would visually show it in orange numbers. The Flamethrower ability has had its damage increased from 34% up to 50%. Then a bunch of these passives were fixed for the mage. Clear casting was reduced the damage bonus from 10% just down to 5%. Clear mind has its empower reduced from 10% down to 5%. Runes of Helios, the ultimate, has had its damage bonus reduced from 30% down to 25%. Prophet of the Fire God had its crit damage bonus reduced from 20% down to 15%. Spell Slinger has its crit chance bonus reduced from 15% down to 10%, and they fixed an issue where the crit chance was increased for standard attacks and not just these abilities. Pyromania had its damage reduced from 20% down to just this 15%. A bug was fixed with Kindle that was increasing the buff duration for the incorrect amount of time. And Reheat, the ultimate on the Pyromancer, was reduced on the triggering time from 6 seconds down to just 4 seconds. They've updated Singe, which should now be able to proc on just light attacks, whereas Watch Hit Burn will now inflict burn from critical hits, but only from abilities. Then we move to the Spear, and their goal was to buff and adjust some of the lesser used abilities. The Sweep ability, with its final coup de grace, has its damage increased from 125% to 150%. And this ability is now considered a heavy attack, so it can now trigger other heavy ability passives. Skewer has had its bleed damage increased to 20%, where previously it was just 10%. Perforate has its damage increased from 70% up to that 80%. And this Cyclone has also had its damage increased from 110% to 130%. Then the Vault Kick, they fixed an issue with its cooldown, where it began 1 frame before the hitbox would appear. And this resulted in the ability going on cooldown if the attack was interrupted early, even if it didn't hit. Then we move to the Ice Gauntlet, and the goal here was to tone down some of its effectiveness, basically nerfing it. The heavy attack on your Ice Gauntlet has basically had its timing adjusted to be in more line of the other weapons of their heavy attacks. Then we have our Ice Storm, and the time was increased between the damage ticks from 0.25 seconds to 0.33 seconds, so it will proc now only 3 times a second rather than 4. They fixed some issues with an item perk with Unending Thaw, made it so that this power basically did no damage, and they've also fixed an issue where Ice Storm would just completely stop. The effect would disappear when you switched your weapon, and this was primarily from Punishing Storm. The Ice Spikes was adjusted so that they fixed it where it displayed a cast timer where it actually just cast instantly. Wind Chill had its damage increased from 16% to 20% per tick. Your Ice Shower had its cooldown increased from 20 seconds to 30 seconds. While you're entombed using this ability, you cannot heal anymore. The health of Entombed has been reduced down to 50% of the maximum health of the player who casts it. So if you have 10,000 health, your Entombed will be equal 5,000. The Breakout Burst was reduced from 168% down to only 70%. The Ice Pylon, the little bot you place down and shoots for you, had its health increased by 20%. They added a maximum lifetime of 45 seconds to it. So even if it can hit a target every second, it's only going to last 45 seconds with this Pylon refresh. They've also fixed this so that it can't be placed down multiple times if you died and got revived. This Ultimate Chill ability was changed so that its damage bonus is now 25% instead of 35%, and they've also fixed it so that it can now apply to pretty much all targets rather than some of them being immune to this. Critical Frost was reduced from 20% down to 15%. Energizing Critical was reduced from 15% down to 10%, and Heavy Freeze now is added a 5-second cooldown between those freeze effects, and otherwise we move on to the Rapier. The Flurry ability should now be able to hit more often, rather than sometimes missing. Tondo's cooldown was reduced from 11 seconds to just 6 seconds, and Riposte had its cooldown reduced from 20 seconds just to 12 seconds. The base stun duration was increased from 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds. And then with your lasting consequence, that has been increased to 2.5 seconds instead of 2 seconds. And then with your ultimate momentum, they've increased the base damage from 25% to 30%. And a bug was fixed from swiftness, where it was proccing from bleed hits rather than just ability hits. So we moved to the musket. The goal was to buff up some of those lesser used abilities. They've increased the base damage of the musket just by 2.5%. They fixed an issue where reloading would not automatically resume after the player was aiming. They've also fixed an issue where the musket's overcharged shots, like your power shot or your powder burn, was not actually consuming whenever you hip fired when crouched. Traps can no longer be triggered by players in the death's door. Sticky bomb has had its damage increased from 175% up to that 235%. And stopping power has had its cooldown reduced from 18 seconds to 15 seconds. Then the shooter's stance has had a 2-second cooldown reduction from 20 seconds to 18 seconds. And now you can exit shooter's stance just by pressing sprint, the ability key, a dodge, escape, or just releasing the right mouse button. And there was a small bug fixed on critical reload that it should now function more consistently. And so that's been all of the weapons. Of course, with this update, we do get an entire new weapon, the Void Gauntlet. So be sure to go and grab the weapon if you're a magic wielder with all that intelligence, and it can be a very good buff for your melee weapon damage, for just that backstab damage on those boss fights. Normally, ranged attacks cannot gain that 100% critical rate. And now with us having a weapon which is melee and also magical, we can now actually benefit from that through that Void Blade, which is a pretty neat buff to the overall consistent single target damage for our magical weapons in PvE. And of course, if you're a healer, this is a pretty neat secondary weapon to have. You also have the ability when using it to drain your life to gain that extra mana. So that's pretty much it for this overall update. There are of course numerous amount of different bug fixes, adjustments, so on, but hopefully I've gone over the main ones that will impact you with regards to these weapons. So again, if I presented this well, consider leaving the video a like, and if you're new around here, consider subscribing. We'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.